Hello, I'm Karen Hudson, and I'm here with six fantastic graphic designers from the film and TV industry. Today, we are guests of Equity Through Design Mentorship Program, and we'd like to thank them for inviting us. And we thank you all for being here. Our group, Equity by Design for Entertainment Graphics, will be showing their work they've created in art departments of film and TV productions, mainly working out of New York City. We realize that the biggest hurdle to getting into our field is knowing this career path actually exists at all. Our mission is to reach out to high school and college students and professionals to let them know that this is an occupation that exists and how to prepare for it. Equity by Design is a committee of graphic designers dedicated to expanding the racial diversity of our professional peer group. This visual presentation shows the range of our works, describes our role in the art department, and explains how we interface with other key players on the job. Many of us has worked in other fields before we joined the union and found out about this opportunity in different ways. Our stories vary, and our presenters are here today to share their paths to entertainment graphics. Thank you. Proud to present my computer artist colleagues, the lovely and talented Ariel Poster, Mason Chesler, Erik Knight, Carlos Moncayo, Jim Tomaselli, and Zach Zirlin.
Hey everybody, my name is Mason. I'm a computer artist, and one of the big questions is, and part of the reason why you're here is, what is a computer artist? We work in the department of films and television shows to help bring the fictional world of the show to life. What that basically means is we design physical things that are going to be on set as graphics, also things that are going to be in post-production, aka the editing room. We're responsible for things such as logo design, signage, packaging, newspapers, books, photo editing, motion graphics, and screen graphics. We also might create elements such as a fake stained glass window, or custom wallpaper, or tiled floor. Our position is not only about graphic design, but we're also responsible for breaking down, listing and detailing the scripted graphic elements of a production. Essentially, we're reading between the lines of a script for its graphic needs. And with that information, we collaborate with all the other departments to make design choices. And on top of that, we also manage we manage the creation and the fabrication of all those elements to be used on set. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Erik Knight. The word computer artist can be confusing, especially if you come from a traditional graphic design background. In film and television, graphic designers are called different names, depending where you are in the country. You might be called a computer artist, you might be called a graphic artist, a graphic designer. The union that we belong to, which is United Scenic Artists, our position is actually that of an assistant art director, along with set designers who do the architectural rendering. But we're most often referred to as graphic artists. So don't get confused. It's all the same thing.
So why do film and TV productions need a graphic artist? The graphics we design are an integral part of creating the fictional world of a show, and sometimes that graphic might drive the storytelling, and other times it's a successful graphic if it's just authentic and right for the scene and just sort of falls into the background and doesn't distract the audience. But you may be wondering, why do productions not just use real graphics that already exist in the world? And the answer is often clearances, which is also called legal. Everything that appears on the screen has to be run by a clearance department whose job is to minimize the risk of a network or production company being sued for copyright infringement. So our role and the need for graphics has grown over the years with the rise of HD and the fear of lawsuits. It's still sometimes possible to use real products depending on the time period, the network making the show, the rules of that show's legal team. But even so, it's often a lot more cost effective and faster to hire a graphic artist to design and create original work, because then the production will just own the work outright and all the rights to it. And it can even give the art department freedom to make stuff up and not have to rely on real things.
So the graphics team is an integral part of the production crew. That may sometimes be only one person on a production, or two or three or more, depending on the size of the show. We produce graphic materials for multiple departments. We make graphics for set decoration, which can be things such as posters, signs, flyers, things that often should fall into the background of a scene and shouldn't pull the audience's attention, but be part of the world of the film or the show. Sometimes we know we've done a good job as computer artists if the audience doesn't notice our work. If we make something look real and right for the scene, you shouldn't notice it because it just works and you're paying attention to the story and not some weird graphic that's jumping out from the screen at you. We often shoot both on location and on stage sets. When we go to location, there's often a lot of elements that need to be covered if they can't be taken down, especially if they might get the production into trouble legally, just like Ariel was talking about, clearance-wise. So we often cover up stuff and replace it with our own sort of fake product, or we're trying to create a scene which might take place in another city, another country, or another time period. And so we need to mask the existing location signs with our own work. We also work closely with the property department. Props is anything that an actor might touch. So of course that is often weapons, but it's also books, newspapers, magazines, any sort of graphic element that an actor will come in direct contact with, blueprints, maps, and so forth. Cigarette packaging, alcohol labels, beer labels, so on. We work with the costume department. Costumes often needs patches on uniforms. Sometimes they need full artwork for jackets, sports teams, mascots, that sort of thing. When a production goes into the editing stage, it's called post-production, and they will often turn back to us after the main shoot of the show is over and request additional material to help the story along. If in the editing process they discover that perhaps something might serve the story better, to generate a new graphic element for them, either on screen, on a phone, on a computer, on a tablet, or perhaps might be used as sort of a title overlay to explain something or further the story along, or some decorative element that they'd like. Last but not least, we work closely with our playback department. If an actor is using a cell phone or interacting with a computer or a tablet, then we're responsible for the graphics that you see on that phone or computer screen. When you dial someone, when you swipe left, swipe right, when you open up a web page, all of that interaction is generated by us. And we set up the files in such a way that hopefully it's foolproof and the actor can touch anywhere on the screen, and the motion graphics will do the rest. So we communicate a lot throughout the day and throughout the production with all those different departments who rely on us to generate the material they need to serve the story.
Who determines the film's look? A graphic artist, direct boss, is the production designer, and they're responsible for overseeing the look of the entire film, both scenery and props. And depending on if it's a film or a TV show, the director or some of the producers might have an overarching vision of what the show should look like. So it's kind of the production designer's job to collaborate with those folks and help bring their vision to life. Oftentimes on a TV show, there's one producer in particular called a showrunner, who's sort of like behind the scenes calling the shots, because there's going to be multiple directors that change from episode to episode. For a movie director, it's kind of like a little different, and they're going to be working a lot more closely with the production designer on the look of the film. Of course, there's also the director of photography, who plays a major role and is making artistic and technical decisions in terms of lighting, kind of like the look and the mood of the image that is being recorded on screen. So it's kind of like those three folks are sort of, designing the look of the film, if you will: the director, the production designer, and the director of photography.
This is about the structure of the art department. So as Mason was just explaining, the production designer is the head of the art department, and they determine the look of all of the sets that are going to be in the show. The computer artist works with everyone in the art department, and underneath the designer is the art director, and it's really their job to make sure that everything that the designer envisions gets executed. And they also oversee the budget. They're basically the manager of the art department. And then there's also the set decorator, who is responsible for all the decorations and furnishings. They work really closely with the production designer to figure out what all of that is. The property master is the head of the props department, and a prop is basically anything that the actors touch. There can be overlap a lot of times between, set decoration and props, but ultimately the props will handle anything that the actors are going to interact with. There's also the set designers, also called an assistant art director. They're the ones who are drafting the sets and doing 3D modeling, things like that, to figure out what the sets are how to actually build the sets. And they'll send those drawings off to the construction department to build them. And then there's the art department coordinator, who is a really key person for making sure everything is running smoothly. They're basically the administrator of the department, and they work with all the people that I just mentioned and make sure everyone is getting all the information they need to do their jobs. And then there's also the art PA, which is an entry-level position, and it's the only non-union position in the art department. And it's a really good way to learn about how the art department works. The art PA, assists everyone and just helps make sure things are running smoothly.
Yeah, my name is Mason Chesler. I'm a graphic artist in TV and film. Just briefly about my career. I mean, I didn't go to college per se to learn graphic design specifically. I went to a fine arts school, and then from there I started driving around box trucks in Massachusetts on small little commercials, and kind of like worked my way up through the art department, figuring out sort of what niche I wanted to go into over the years. Um, with these two pieces, I was lucky enough to to create some fun stuff. On Ray Donovan, there is a scene where one of our main characters is having a trippy moment, and basically with this piece, the director sort of gave us references of what he was looking uh, for like this big mural piece. It was like a big mural that we had printed on adhesive backed material and applied to a wall. Um, and Yeah, it was a fun project. All the images in the photo are all photographs, and with uh, painting on top of it. So it was a lot of like combination of techniques of photo bashing techniques, and also um, like hand painting. Um, so it was a really fun project. As a graphic artist, these are sort of like the more fun things that you get to make. Um, but also, just keep in mind that within the position, a big part of what we do also is sort of making the minutia and you know, the things that sort of create the world building. So, these kind of projects although are fun, it's just sort of like one piece to the puzzle in terms of what it means to be a graphic artist in our industry. On the right is a really fun map that I got to design for Joker. And it was kind of fun because I got to sit down with the production designer and sort of like sculpt things and take away bridges and enlarge, certain sectors. And he kind of brought this to the director to sort of create like a key, so that story wise the director kind of like kept this in his office and would like make notes of like, this scene happens here, and this is where Arthur lives, and this is the kind of neighborhood it is. And Gotham City obviously is a reflection of New York in a lot of ways. So we're also like figuring out like what neighborhoods kind of like correlate with New York City. And beyond that, it was like a really fun project because I had to do a lot of period research in terms of what like a map from the 1930s looked like, and what the different symbols on the map meant. And just trying to match that aesthetic was a challenge, a fun challenge for sure. All right, so this slide kind of shows just a few pieces that I did on the Joker movie. One of the main things that we get to, do is, some of the big props sometimes. So, the spinny sign that Joker is using in the beginning of the movie was, had to be created by a graphic artist because if you remember in the beginning of the film, there's like these kids that chase the Joker down to an alleyway and like kind of like use the sign to beat him up, and the sign breaks. So part of the reason why they had me do it instead of a scenic artist is because as a prop, especially if it's going to be like a prop that's used in a stunt and it's going to break, you have to make multiples because you have to budget in multiple takes in case something goes wrong, or something isn't acted right, or the shot doesn't line up correctly, or whatever it may be. You need to create multiples. So that was kind of like a fun project. And you know, we had to do multiple iterations until it kind of like eventually arrived to this yellow sign. Also, you know, a major part of what we do a lot of times is like text or newspapers, magazine, printed materials. On the Joker, there was a lot of newspapers. In fact, for the one scene where he sees the killer clown newspaper, there was all these quite a lot of Chinese newspapers that we had to create. We actually had to get those translated. We had two translators. One to make sure that the translation was correct, and the other to kind of like proofread the previous translators. And it was really important from the studio that, you know, anything that was on camera was, you know, made sense, you know. And I think that kind of detail sort of goes back into the world building element that we all sort of do on these TV shows and movies. The bottom TV guide, you know, was just part of set dressing, and it really, you know, I really don't think it ever made it into the movie, but it was just there. It's, you know, it's, we like I said before, we sort of like make the minutia, and every once in a while we get to make something fun that lands on camera. But for the most part, I want to say we sort of have to be detail oriented for everything that we make. A lot of times, because sometimes we make something that is, you know, might be intended for background, but it does end up on camera. Okay, I'm ready for the next slide. Another big part of our job is photo composites and being comfortable communicating with a still photographer. Yeah, so you know, basically the process of this was sort of first sourcing the background image that we were going to use. So I had to compile a list of different backgrounds and present that to the production designer and the director. And then from there, we had to schedule our photo shoot with all the actors. There was even a prop that had to be prefabricated. So that was an additional graphic in the photo that we had to have prepared on the day. I was present during this photo shoot. And I think, you know, I think that's an important kind of skill to have, to sort of have a shorthand with a still photographer and be able to talk about lighting and composition. And also, you know, if you're the only one there that's art directing, if, you know, being comfortable sort of communicating what you want to get out of, you know, the shot, how, you know, in this one, we kind of had to figure out how the actors needed to be compositionally. So that was, you know, it was a really fun project from start to finish, but it is a bit of a process. And on the bottom is a 3D printed badge on the tick. And that was kind of the first time that I really started to experiment with 3D printing and kind of like fabricating, you know, props for, you know, in the 3D space. And I don't know, I think that's sort of going to be a new thing in the future where, you know, in terms of like prop fabrication, or I've even used 3D printers to sort of like match door numbers that are in front of apartment doors. So if we're on location and like no one can find a matching door number or something, you know, I've had to come up with those a few times. I 3D printed a vintage 1970s pinwheel. Just, I don't know. I feel like it's coming up more and more that you know, it could really become a useful thing. So thank you guys so much. Yeah, that's it.
Hello, my name's Erik Knight, and I've been in the film and TV industry, I think, almost 30 years. I always loved drawing and photography. Well, drawing as a child and then photography when I got into high school, and was able to kind of bring some of those interests together. Went to art school and came out with a degree in film video back when we shot film for film. And started doing internships and production assisting on sets, and moving on up to filming and editing music videos and various projects and odd jobs and documentaries and so on, and doing my own shorts and getting around to festivals and getting some stuff on broadcast on cable. And during all that time when I was doing my own, pursuing my own work, I was working, I'd sort of settled into the art department as an art coordinator. And I worked with one designer for many, many years, Win Thomas, who started with Spike Lee, whose early films I was able to work on, and came up with this designer for a while, and then started dabbling into doing graphics again. And so for about the last 10, 11 years or so, I sort of segued into graphics, and now I've been on the blacklist for 8 seasons altogether. And in between seasons, I often would do a feature or jump onto another series for a couple of episodes. And I just want to show you some of the type of stuff that I do, and some of the materials that we end up having to work with. We obviously, we've told you that we do work with a whole bunch of different departments, and they require our work to be fabricated in a whole bunch of different materials. Set decoration is a large part of what we do, and we're looking at some storefronts. The top left is like a sort of little boutique hotel. All of this was made primarily with using Adobe Illustrator software. It's vector-based, which means you can scale up and scale down to any size, from a small logo on an ID card to a mural. We get our work fabricated by outside print houses, especially for work that's routed or in plastics or resins, and special oversized banners. We do a lot of printing in-house, but it's on a smaller scale. The largest printer we have is a 5-foot wide printer, so we are able to do some pretty big material. But when it comes to a lot of specialty materials and fabrics, we go to the outside vendor. And then also I don't have to be responsible for the output when the machines start failing. We can go to the next slide. I also wanted to show you an example of how we communicate where all the stuff goes that we make to the crew that's actually on the set, because we rarely get down to the set. We're either in the office or these days working from home and sending stuff out to vendors for fabrication, who then deliver it to the production office, and the art coordinator then turns that around and delivers it to the appropriate department. So here was a Paris street that we're doing in the West Village, and I gave them sort of an overhead map and numbered the signs as to where they were supposed to go and what American signs they were supposed to mask. Again, we were only there for about half a day or even less. So we didn't go all out. We just covered some existing signage to get rid of the English, get the French words in there, and mask the stuff that wasn't so obviously New York. I think it was also a night shoot, so you know they turned the lights down a bit and gave it a passing grade. Next slide. Again, this is just to illustrate some of the different materials that we work with and the kind of stuff we do. The bottom left is cut vinyl. We actually end up doing a lot of that for storefronts, window displays, offices. This one was done with just a frosted vinyl, which is very popular in the corporate world. The upper left was kind of a fun project. It was supposed to be an abandoned subway station that actually had pneumatic tubes running through it. And so they had this wonderful piece of hardware that was all the switches for this old switchboard, but they wanted to make the actual light board for it as to where the trains, where you would be able to locate the trains from, you know, some central operations center. And the electrician actually stuck some real bulbs in it and gave it some life. And so what was a very flat piece of work with just sort of essentially lines and numbers and circuit looking stuff was printed out, and then the scenics went over it. That's our painters who give it a real wonderful look. They age it down, give it a real weathered and rusted look, and then pop some dirty old light bulbs in there. Bottom right is a tombstone. Again, that's just a routed piece of foam. We sent the file over to a vendor, and he routed it just on sort of an inch or half-inch thick piece of foam. The painters or the scenics then glued that down onto a thicker piece of foam and kind of chiseled around the outside, gave it a wonderful age and weathered stone look. And the poor girl had to pass away. The other materials you see are other resins, plastics, and routed foam that was used for the outside of an embassy, a CIA podium, some Senate chamber, and some research office. So the scenics did the upper right mural based on a smaller drawing I gave to them. Oftentimes with scenics and murals, they won't work in, I won't hand them something in full scale. I'll give them something just on a page, and they're able to sort of scale that up by eye, especially since it was supposed to be hand painted. That was the effect that we wanted to have. So that's just an example of a lot of the different types of materials and purposes that the work we do goes towards. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carlos Moncayo, and I study advertising in Colombia. And when I came to the US, I started working on TV, but mainly on non-union shows and indie movies. So different structure, obviously less money. I didn't work as a graphic designer at the beginning. I was doing more set dressing, a little of props, a little of everything, to be honest, just not like a specific position. Sometimes in the art department, you kind of end up doing a little of everything. And then I realized graphics and how the amount of like the variety, to be honest, I was boring in advertising to do kind of like the same. And in this world, you basically creating different worlds every time. And that's what I poked me actually to try to join the union, which I did a few years ago. So I'm going to show a few of my work in this industry. Um, Illustration, it's one of my favorite things to do. This was for First Wave Club. The inspiration, well, everything shifts sometimes. The inspiration at the beginning was the Jetsons. I think it's Kenny West, the one who has huge Jetsons, printouts, and paintings. So we start with him as our reference. The designer wanted to do also big printouts, which are the ones on the left, on the top left. And after actually we start to design and we switch out to Murakami, a Japanese artist. So we start to create these kind of characters. Method Man was the one who was playing this character. Um, and then the set changed suddenly. They get in the location, so they need to build. And the designer didn't want to do the printouts anymore. He wanted to do a full wall. So that's what we ended up doing. So this was like a quick move to go from one design to jump to the other design in a way bigger scale, with a kind of different treatment, but same characters as you can see. So I base the final result on what I was working on. This was printed on a vinyl, cut out, and the cynics applied on set. On the next slide, we have a little of everything, props mainly. Again, on the left one, Tank was a character, a toy in a TV show, and the props design, they hire a third vendor to create this character, which was like kind of important in that episode. And they decided to have a redesign of the toy. So I ended doing the illustration and the packaging. It was very fun. We also have some props, some magazines that maybe they're not as fun to do, but they are also part of these worlds that we create for each project. Um, Sometimes we don't really see them. There's the ones on the top. It was background. Sometimes it's set dressing. You just like put in there to give like more life, more elements, more layers of graphics. And sometimes it's mainly like it's right there in it's a hero prop, as we call, and it's an important piece. Its screens is something like lately at least I've been doing like a lot. The one on the top, it was like a fake CeeLo, like a CeeLo lookalike um, web page. So you need to create something quite similar. Also, as Eric was saying about legal stuff, it cannot be Google Maps. So you need to create the map of. Also, you can go to stock images, get image stock. So that the pace on this industry is crazy fast. It's not as in advertising agencies, you can create a logo in a month, sometimes 2 months, and this is 2 days or sometimes 2 hours. So the resources are very important. Sometimes you need to mimic something that already exists, like the daily news, with copy and photograph for a specific they're in the script is in the script, or sometimes like the one on the right bottom. It was like a Scruff, which is an existing um, matching app, but obviously with certain kind of characters. So sometimes is you recreate something that exists. Sometimes you just base on to create something relatively new. My last screen was this, as Eric showed, this dimensional sign on the top right was for life. Um, Different ways to do the same. He did a router on the foam, and this one when layers were cut out and they put it together. Sometimes depends on the budget, on the timing, who is doing it. You can get the same result pretty much. So just not just one way to do it. The one on the top left, it was a mural, and I guess your work also depends who are you working with. Some production designers, or depends also on location. For this one, it was on location, so it was kind of like um, a concern about how to reset the wall. If we need to use it again, the mural, if we need to go back in another episode, how can we create something to look exactly the same? So I did it on Illustrator, and then we printed out on vinyl. And on top of that, the cynics came and did some spray paint job. So we had like three, kind of like the same as the design that Mason did. You need to have multiple copies sometimes. So you need to figure it out what is the best way to create that. Um, on the bottom, the lower, we have a campaign I did for high maintenance, also same as Mason and Eric. And I've been talking about photography. So how can you get in communication to create this fake campaign that it was show like one of the main characters was, um, and what would be the best material, create the logo, create kind of like the concept of the campaign, the fake campaign with producers to tell this story. And on the bottom right, we have Lubeck was a fictional prison that we created for life. Um, and then this one was vinyl cut on a structure the construction team will build. You basically just need to uh, feel the space, let them know the position, try to figure it out the best way to look, and then the cynics go again and make it look real and aged. Say with the vinyl on the bus, right there, vinyl cut. So I think the most interesting part of this work, of this job, is the variety of things you can do. Sometimes might not be what you really want to do as illustration, but it's always very, very fun to create and see what you've been doing and designing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ariel. I started in film and TV as an art PA, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but it was a really great way to learn about the art department and all the different roles. And I have an art background, but I didn't have a graphic design degree. And I talked to a lot of computer artists about what I needed to do. Should I get a degree specifically in graphic design? And they said, you really just need to be able to do the work. So I started taking classes on nights and weekends, continuing ed, and I've been working in the union as a graphic artist for the past 8 years. I really like working on period shows and comedies and also kids shows. I've done 6 seasons of Sesame Street, and the last year, or 2019, I did a new show that Sesame Workshop is making with Apple TV. So here's some examples. I worked on the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel pilot, and I know there was a question in the chat about how many people work on a show, and this was me and another graphic designer named Maggie Reuter, and we overlapped for a little bit, but it was more about timing. So we had I had some time by myself, then we overlapped, and then she took over. So it can really vary on the size of the project and the needs of the graphics. But for this, the show takes place in the 1950s, and we had to do a subway set. So you can see the photo of the set on the stage and the set dresser, putting up some of the ads. So we had to make all of the ads to look correct for the period, and they're a mix of real things. You can see sort of the real ones peeking in there, like the WNYC. We were allowed by clearances to use that time period correct real ad. But then the ones on the top are ones that we created specifically for the show. So we ran fake names through clearances. You've got the fake gas and electric company and fake airline, fake beer. So we made those logos, and then we took stock images that looked like artwork that would have been used in the period to complete the ad. And then you can also see there the image from the show of the character taking the subway. And then like things like, you know, we found a real subway map and just sort of cleaned it up to look right, so it wouldn't look, you know, aged. And then, you know, things we had to think about, like which subway line was she on, what would it have been called then. So those are all the details. And then I just included the show logo because often we make a logo just for internal use of the production. So this was the logo that I made just like, you know, the first day probably that I got there, just so we had something to feel like, you know, we were on a real pilot TV show. And after we finished shooting, they decided to use the logo for the show. So that was cool. This is a TV, this is the show I was talking about, Helpsters, that is on Apple TV. It's a kids show, and it's about these monsters who have a shop. They're called the Helpsters, and humans come in and the Helpsters help them solve their problems. So this is just an example of like a location where the art department comes in. You can see on the upper right there what the storefront looked like before we got there, and then also what it looked like for the set. And we built this was the main set for the show, so we built this also on the stage, the interior of the shop, as well as this, we replicated this exterior on the stage as well. So the graphic needs were, you know, coming up with the dimensional lettering for the sign. You can see on the bottom right, that was the Helpsters logo that I made, and it was used a lot in different applications. Here it was used in a frosted like outline vinyl version, which is, you know, like what Erik was talking about, where we do window graphics. And then there was also, the designer wanted photos of the characters sort of with their happy customers. So we did a photo shoot with a bunch of the puppets, and then I worked them into stock images showing, you know, who they're helping. And these are just some more examples from that show. You know, our job is to make things look authentic and real for each piece that we're working on. And something fun about a kids show is that it should still be believable, but you get to be a little more creative. It doesn't have to replicate exactly what's in the real world. So, you know, I got to think about like, what would a magazine that monsters make look like, or what kind of cereal might they eat? So, you know, we made a newspaper. The showrunner, the head producer for the show, he really liked calling everything in the show this fake brand Burglebees. So everything is Burglebees, the Burglebees Gazette. You know, Burglebees is the company that makes the muesli and the oats. So, you know, it's just fun. You got a bunch of newspapers printed. We made the magazines. The purple photo is sort of like a tin type, but it's this character who's from a fictional land of Primflandia, and everything is purple there. So their tin types weren't black and white, they were purple. And then just to sort of show like how things get used in different ways. Like for instance, I made the cereal box as a prop, and then we were gonna shoot on location here on 33rd Street. And there's, you know, well, I don't know if there are anymore, but there used to be telephone booths. They're less and less all the time, but a lot of times you have to cover ads. You know, telephone booths have real ads on them. So we needed a quick ad to go on a telephone booth that our actor might be walking by. So I already had made the cereal brand, so why not have an advertisement for them? And then lastly, I just included this because it's like a fun example. A prop can also be a vehicle. And, you know, depending on the show, we might be doing like cop cars or food trucks. And this is a kid's version of a food truck. So this is for Sesame Street, and Cookie Monster has a food truck with another character named Gonger. And the prop department took an old USPS truck, and the scenic department painted it, and I came up with a logo, and the scenics painted it on the side. And I should have included a better photo, but I also made a fake license plate that's on the front that says nom nom. And then on the back, I made a bumper sticker that's like a I Heart New York, but it's, you know, an I Heart cookie with a image of a cookie. So that's just more examples of the various things that we do.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Jim Tomaselli, and can you guys hear me? Okay, great. So I started off, well, I guess I started off, I went to college for 3D animation and 2D animation, which I promptly abandoned right after college. College kind of burned me out from it. So I moved on to the print industry because it was easier to get a job. And a lot of those skills carried over into this career here. I know we were talking about earlier possible career paths leading into this, and I think a print shop is a great place to get started. So much of what we do is printing and knowing how to vend things out to vendors to get certain items that can't be printed in-house printed. So you can gain a lot of that knowledge from a local print shop, and a lot of those print shops in little towns will hire you right out of school. One of the other things I did when I got out of school was I got into painting. Well, I always drew graffiti throughout my whole life from basically high school onwards. But once I was done with school, I didn't really know what I was doing art-wise. I wasn't totally satisfied in the print shops. So I really decided to expand on the graffiti that I was into. So I started painting every weekend as often as I could. I met other graffiti writers and really grew. I learned a lot about color theory and form, how to fully immerse yourself in your artwork and find meditation in it, which I found to be pretty awesome. It really helps you expand if you can lose yourself in it. And graffiti really helped with that. I never knew it would carry over into the movie industry. I had no idea I would be in this industry when I was doing all of this, but I spent probably 8 or 10 years in the print industry. And then during that whole time, I was also painting graffiti. So once I got in this industry, I realized that there was an ability to use those skills for film and television, which worked out really well. I know this isn't graphic design here, but it's still graphic in a way. And this was a really fun project. This was on the set of Modern Love Season 2. I actually did this back in October, and they brought me on set for 2 days to paint this rooftop. And they pretty much let me do anything I wanted. I got to use all the materials they already had there. I came in one day after everybody left because of the fumes, and I basically just painted one layer the whole night I was there. Covered the whole place once. As you can see, there's some stuff in the background behind some of the newer stuff. Looks all faded. So once I did one pass, after I left that night, they went in and did an aging pass over everything. And then I came back in and did another layer of graffiti over the top of all that aging. So it gave it a really genuine look, like a rooftop in a city, which is what they were going for. So this one here is actually a motion graphics piece, and this is a Kino animation. I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's basically like lottery you do at a gas station. This was really fun. I did this while I was working with Mason on Ray Donovan, and I had to research what they looked like and then basically recreate it, adding my own little bit of flair to it. And I had some motion graphic skills going into this career, but I didn't really have a chance to use them for anything functional, so I never really expanded on them. So it was really fun to be able to access those skills and sort of flex them a little bit here for something like this. Had a lot of fun doing that. That probably took me about 4 or 5 hours. And yeah, was really, really happy about that one. Yeah, so you never know what you're going to be able to use in this industry. We make so much stuff that you would never even think about, that is just littered throughout regular everyday life. Mason was talking about it earlier, about I view it kind of like the sprinkles on top. It's all the little stuff. Post-it notes, stuff on the desk, little labels, everything that makes the reality around you kind of genuine and lived in is the stuff that we make. Some of it's very mundane, some of it's a little more extravagant. It's really fun to actually have that range to be able to play with. And this is just some more stuff here that's kind of the more mundane. Some of it is, supposed to look as genuine as possible, like the Sports Illustrated cover there. So that was basically something that we researched and had to recreate, that look and feel of Sports Illustrated. Credit cards. There's a cigarette pack in there that I had to make while I was working with Jane on Hustlers. They never ended up using it because they ended up getting a pre-approved prop, I believe. But I basically had to unfold a pack of cigarettes and figure out all the lines where everything was going to fold and have them printed up and score all the lines and fold it myself, tape it together. That was really fun, even though it didn't end up getting used. It still looked really genuine. I was really proud of that. And there's some beer bottle labels there for Hustlers, another project I worked with Jane on, the Hustlers movie with Jennifer Lopez. And I was in charge of making all the graphics for the strip club. And one of those things was beer bottles, coasters, posters of girls with the logos on them. I even had to add tattoos to some of the pictures of the girls for later on when the Hustlers, later on in the movie, gets taken over by a different group. So the girls, they looked a little different and they had tattoos on them. So I had to add some tattoos, pre-approved tattoos, which was a lot of fun too. And then there's also a ticket in there for a plane ticket, and that's pretty much almost an exact recreation. We got a picture of one and we just recreated it, added our own logo. Yeah, so you really never know what you're going to have to make in this industry. It's been really fun to be able to do such a broad range of things. So I think that's it.
Hey all, my name is Zach Zirlin. I came to graphic design by way of theater, actually. I went to school at NYU for set design for theater and had some great teachers who kind of let me know that this is a viable career option, and I'd always loved movies growing up, and so it kind of became a natural transition through some internships, which don't really exist so much anymore in the film and television industry, but that's how I got my start. So I wanted to show you guys a couple of projects quick. So this is West Side Story, which should have been out a couple of months ago, but because of COVID, it is now coming out next year. But it is the 60th anniversary, so maybe it's fitting and more exciting that way. I don't know. So this was a really fun project, and we transformed many, many city blocks of Paterson, New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, Harlem, the Bronx, into late 50s New York City. And we got to do a couple of different looks to it. We had the heavily Puerto Rican neighborhoods, the more Polish, Eastern European neighborhoods, and kind of distinguishing between color and style. And we got to pull from so much reference. And this job was a little unique because it was such a high profile project. They'd been doing work on it for years. So we arrived and they already had a couple of researchers whose job was just to gather research from costumes to sets to locations to signage. So we got to comb through, so many files of photographs and then kind of pick and choose what we liked the most and recreate stuff, and sometimes recreate something exactly, sometimes go through the clearance process and come up with cleared names. And it was a huge undertaking. As you can see, this is just a couple of businesses, but blocks and blocks of overhead signage, window signage, price tags, murals, awnings, everything. So this was a really crazy project. And one of the things you'll see on this is, and especially if you're looking at old research, is the methods of sign making have changed considerably over the years. So we couldn't really go through and do vinyl signs or stuff on plastic necessarily. We really tried to make it as authentic as possible. And so that meant so many of our signs were hand painted. So one of the things that we did that I thought was really fun is we came up with a key of different types of aging, and we gave them a letter. It's like A through F or whatever, and then we had different types of, like, how skilled the sign painter was that painted that sign. We had a key and our scenic team had a key, so we could have a sign made and have it printed, and it looks perfect and it's like well printed and everything, and we'd hand it off to the scenics and they would take hammers and chains to it and kind of mess it up a little bit, and then they would go through and repaint over every sign to give it brush strokes to make it a little less perfect and to really give it a lived in older feel. So we got to do so many cool things with this, with all sorts of materials and dimensional letters, and we had those Pepsi caps in the center image manufactured in Georgia and had to like redraw and figure out how to do that in 3D, and it was a really great project. This was an example of some hero prop work. And we've talked a lot about props in this, and you've seen some really great examples from the other designers. And this is an example of something we consider a hero prop. And that's a prop that is integral to the story, that is very likely to be seen big on screen in the final cut. And so it sometimes gets a little more focus than a background magazine or something that's eyewash. So because this was such like a big hero prop, and I mean, kind of spoiler alert, this is one of the last episodes of the series, but we got to pull all of these things together from 6 seasons of the show. So I got to go through, and you can see that there's the different sketches on each of the wanted sheets. And so those were sketches that we had a really incredible team of scenics over the years, and we got to pull from them and then work with the photographers to make sure we had the right photos for the year and everything, work with the writers to make sure all the descriptions were correct in terms of birthdays and what they thought the FBI would know about them and what was right and what was wrong and everything, and to create these like really hero pieces of paper that were a pretty integral part to these scenes. You're like, oh my God, are they going to be caught? I don't know. Watch and find out. But one of the things that I really wanted to do with this is this show takes place in the late 80s. And because of that, technology for faxing, you're not emailing anything at that point. I grew up, my family had a fax machine, and I very distinctly remember everything came on a thermal paper. It came and it rolled, and then if you got multiple, you had this like curly queue of paper. So one of the things that was really important to me was I wanted to replicate that. And what we ended up doing was purchasing a fax machine for solely this purpose. I would print them out, and we did a bunch of tests in terms of density of ink and the quality of it and what looks like it made the most sense just for these 3 pieces of paper you see in this. But having that tactile quality, even though you can't actually feel it as a viewer, I think is like a little bit of extra realism to it that I think is a really important thing that you can do whenever possible. So I was lucky enough to work on the first season of all of the Marvel Netflix shows. And so this sign and this setting was kind of a big one in the Defenders. It's where all of our heroes finally met for the first time. So with this, we started with the director and with the location we found, which was like an old automotive repair shop in Williamsburg, which you can see in the top left. We want to do a shot similar to Citizen Kane, which is the black and white image on the right. And so in that, the camera starts and it pans through the sign, which pulls apart and goes right to the skylight. So we had our starting off point there. So we took the design very literally from that, but got to incorporate our cleared name and work with a bunch of outside vendors to create, all the various signs in this. This was really fun because we were kind of fleshing out a full, supposedly real restaurant. So we had a big light box sign, which is the red one that you see. We had a neon sign, a neon outrigger sign, which is double-sided and was really fun. I think our production designer did a really quick sketch, and then I got to draw it and then work with the neon manufacturer. And it's always fun to choose neon colors and, which is it? The 12 greens do you want? which is really fun. And then that shows up and you're coordinating with the grips and the electrics to make sure, okay, how are we going to hang it? How are we going to power it? Does it need to dim? All of those questions. And then we got to do the actual Royal Dragon sign, which is can letters, more neon, and then a light box sign for the letters. And then we have to work with the construction team to figure out how it's rigged so that it opens up so the camera doesn't knock it down and it gets destroyed. While I was preparing stuff for this presentation and just trying to see if there were better images than I had available to myself, I found, you can see in the bottom right, that for Comic-Con a couple of years ago, which I had no idea, they had turned a bunch of the logos from the show into the part of the subway car of this toy, which to me is like the coolest thing in the world. So there's the Metro General Hospital logo, which I designed, and the Trish Talk, and the Royal Dragon, and Colleen Wing's dojo, and like all of these things that existed in our TV show are all of a sudden part of a little set of toys that like will have another life that hopefully some kid is destroying and playing and having a great time with. Like, one of the coolest things. So we know that there's going to be a ton of questions, and we have a few things that I'm sure everyone is kind of thinking about and asking. Do you actually need a college degree? Not necessarily. For myself, I didn't go to school for graphic design. I went to school for for set design for theater, which is still design, but not computer based. So you don't need the college degree, but you do need to have the skills to actually do the job. College is a great place to acquire those skills, but it's not absolutely necessary. Computer artists rely on visual principles and processes, graphic design history, typography, color theory, all sorts of things. But you need a handle on them. Do you need college for it? Kind of your call. You need to have strong skills in kind of the standard industry software, which, you know, I'm sure you all realize is Adobe. They've got it down pretty pat. There are other options out there, and you're welcome to use whatever you need to get the job done, but Adobe is a really great place to start. Motion graphics are becoming more and more popular as more shows are doing phones or computers or all sorts of things. So motion graphics are a great skill to pick up. Photography, illustration, type design, any of those are assets. So how can you break into it? As you can tell, there are a million different ways to do it. Out of the 6 people you heard speak today, none of us had the same path, and we're all doing the same job. So one of the things that you can do, or one of the options, is you can reach out to production designers. I know last week there was the panel with production designers. It's a great place to start. You can reach out to any of us to ask questions. Maybe we can review a portfolio or provide feedback. We are here to help, and it's not just us. There are more graphic designers out there. So pay attention to who's out there. One of the things that we recommend is, you know, watch the credits, see who's working on stuff you like. If it's in New York especially, and it's someone who's local, Google them, see if you can reach out to them. So I worked as an intern for a little bit, then I worked as a PA for a while. So that's one route. I know Ariel did that. I'm sure everyone else in here PA'd at some point, but working as a PA gives you a really great idea of how an art department and production as a whole functions. You can make connections with all sorts of staff members within the art department, and then they're a really great resource, and they'll remember you if you do a great job when they're looking to staff up their next project. There are some resources online such as ArtCube, Facebook groups, non-union jobs where you can network, get your name out there, make it clear that you're ready to work, you know what you're doing, and ready to learn is a really important thing. And then when the time is right, we are all members of United Scenic Artists 829, and that we are graphic artists within that union. So when the time is right, and if you're feeling like this is the right path for you, you create a portfolio, and then there's an exam that you take, which is part practical, part presentation of your portfolio, and you put that together, sign up for a date, and you apply to the union.
Hey, Zach, I'm going to interrupt for a second because I'm concerned that we're going to run out of time for Q&A. So maybe we can leave these slides up and go to Q&A, Elizabeth?
Yes, sorry. Yeah. My only problem when this is up is I can't get to some other stuff I need to post. That's all. But
We
wait a
can
minute.
stop sharing and
Mhm.
I got it. No, I got it. I figured it out. You want me to start now then, Gary?
Yeah, I think so.
Great.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, thank you for
And
that.
then again, we can, they can read the frame.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Liz, and I've been looking at your questions carefully and trying to consolidate them and make it work for everybody. Try not to put new questions in, but do contact us. There's going to be a questionnaire I'm going to post in a moment, and also our website. So let me get to some of these, which were answered already, but I'm sure other people have answers. Victoria wants to know, how do you become a person who focuses on graphics for film and TV specifically? How do you become that? Some of you sort of answered that, and that's for anybody. How do you become someone who focuses on graphics for film or TV? Would anyone like to take that?
Sure. Yeah, I think you can. Again, I think the recommendation of getting into a print shop. I mean, everything you're going to do in a print shop is going to prepare you for graphics for this. It's the kind of thing where if you know the basics of Adobe and you've played around with it in high school, you could jump without any college into a print job and start to perfect those skills or start to use those skills in a real world environment. And you'll make all kinds of things you'd never even think of, envelopes, books for people, programs. A lot of that stuff carries right over into what we do. There's really no difference between the graphics that you see in film and television from the things that are in the room with you right now. If you're in a room with anything that's printed, it's it's all kinds of stuff. If you want to get a hands-on experience, I would say you could start creating the things that you wouldn't, that are around you in your normal everyday life. And if you know the basics of those programs, you can start to perfect them, slowly. And a print shop's a great way to jump right into it. You could have a moderate understanding of Adobe suites when you go into a print shop, and by the time you leave, you'll be a novice at the very least.
Great. Thank you, Jim. This question is specifically to Mason. What computer programs do you use to recreate props from different time periods? That's a little bit complicated question because we know they're fabricated by other people, but that was the question. What computer programs do you use to recreate props from different time periods? And if you guys look in the chat, it was partially answered by Ariel and also Erik, our panelists. So Mason, would you chime in on that from your point of view?
Yeah, sure. As Zach mentioned before, it's everything is pretty much made in the Adobe suite. I don't really have like a special trick up my sleeve in terms of like programs to make it period correct. I think the biggest thing is really researching exactly what you want your piece to look like, and then attacking from there, and really honing in on the fine details of what that period, if it's from the 1920s or from the 40s, make sure buy a book that has all the advertisements from the 20s and 30s, or whatever time period you're trying to go after, and look at the graphic elements that they used and simply recreate it in your piece. And then if you want it to look older or aged, that's another fun kind of thing that you could do on top of that. If it's supposed to be like an old map or an old letter or something, you can apply texture to whatever you're doing, and then people also, there's a big department in TV and film called the scenic department, and that's basically all the painters that paint and age the sets. Jim mentioned before how they would run around and age everything that he painted, did graffiti on afterwards. So if things need to be aged down, you can hand that stuff off to a professional scenic artist who can make it look really old, or Yeah. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, it's basically just Adobe, the Adobe suite. Nothing more, and really good research.
Thank you, Mason. Keying off of that, Noah wanted to know, and this was partially answered by Erik, but Noah wanted to know, and this is for anybody, how much research goes into computer art? I assume he means a specific project. And where do you find resources? This was partially answered, but would anyone else like to add to that, please? How
Sure.
much
Yeah.
Great.
I was just gonna say we do a ton of research on everything all the time. At least I'm sure it's true for everyone else. I know I do. I think, like, especially on a period piece, we have to research, like, what were the typefaces, like, let's say, for all of that beautiful signage that Zach did for West Side Story, some of it was hand painted, some of it was dimensional lettering. Like, he had to know, what did dimensional lettering look like in that time period, for the facts that he showed, what fonts could you use that would replicate what a fax machine looks like. In Mrs. Maisel, we did a ton of research about the 1950s. Everything we did had to look correct for the period. I worked on a show called The Nick that took place in 1900. It was the same kind of thing as West Side Story, where all of the signs in New York City at the time were painted. So, how do you recreate that look? There is sometimes a dedicated research person on a show, especially like a really large budget period piece. But a lot of times, even if there is that, in addition to that, the graphics person is just doing a ton of research. And even if it's a modern day show, like, you might be making something that you're just not familiar with. We are constantly changing modes, constantly changing styles. We have to be good at everything. So it's really important to look at, like, okay, like, what does a sports magazine look like? What does an arts magazine look like? How can you tell, like, if you just look at a magazine on the stand, like, what makes it look like that? So we're constantly thinking about, typography, color, and, what things looked like now and also in the past. So research is really key.
Great. Thank you, Ariel. We have about 6 minutes left, guys. We're going to go to 6:05 instead of 6 o'clock. So we have a couple of more things. Rio wanted to know how many other computer artists are on your team. Would anyone like to comment on that? Ariel partially in the chat commented. Anybody want to say how many? I know it's from one of you to what?
3 at the most. That would be a pretty extensive show. A lot of times it's 2, especially more now. I know that when I first came in to the industry, it was 1 and starting to become more common to have 2. But the first show I worked on was with Gary Sergel, actually, who was on this call on Elementary, and I was brought in as the 3rd, and I was a permanent 3rd. It wasn't a temporary thing. So a lot of the police shows have a lot more graphics than some of the other shows. So I know that Elementary was considered to be like a police type show, and so that had a lot of paperwork that had to be made. So that's why they had 3 designers. But typically it's 1 to 2.
Great.
Also, one more thing with that is that something that I know I experience a lot is, maybe it's just the shows that I'm on, it feels like there's a lot of more the traditional graphics in terms of signage, props, costumes, set deck, and everything. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, we have this whole set with 50 computers and everyone's on their phones and it's going to be in every episode of the series. And you're like, whoa, that's a little much right now. So sometimes I find that it's getting more and more common that you can bring someone on who's specifically doing more motion graphics and playback graphics, because it is becoming a bigger thing. If you have a show that's a lot of people texting back and forth and tracking people and encrypting stuff, that can end up being a lot of work for just the couple of people doing traditional graphics. And sometimes it expands to have kind of its own little offshoot of motion graphics people as well.
Great. Thank you, Jim and Zach. Christian had a good question. What are your tips on managing accumulated content, like stuff you already have and then you want to save it? And how often do you end up working with your old work that you've libraried or cataloged.
A lot.
Any... Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, if you can use it, if it's something, and a lot of times you'll have to modify it slightly, but yeah, it's another part of this is building a huge library of items, and then being able to call back on those things. So, yeah, I don't know how everybody else organizes their files, but typically, you know, it's organized by show, and then, you know, you're like, oh, I think I used it on this show, or, you know, you start searching through your files. You know, the search bar definitely helps on your computer for sure. I feel like that happens a lot. Anybody else?
Well, I'm not a panelist, but I was going to say I find stuff I didn't use for another project that I've accumulated. I end up sometimes using for a future project.
Yeah,
I'm
never
sure
get
you
rid
all
of
do.
anything.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that or your archival system? I think we all
I'll
have
step
our own.
in. I mean, I think it's really important that you know, you keep your files organized. You know,
Super.
anything that you make, yeah, it's an important thing. It in a way becomes an asset, a template, you know, for other things. If you're caught in a moment where you need to react to something, or you know, you don't have you're in a time crunch. So in my mind, you know, anything that you kind of make becomes a future template for something else, or reference for, you know, a piece in the future.
Thank you, Mason. That's wonderful. We had a few different questions on what programs you use, and I think that was addressed and answered, but would anyone like to say, if like one person just put in a question about self-teaching, so you go on Adobe, you could self-teach yourself, Photoshop, etc. Would anyone like to comment on what the most important program that you would learn first if you were trying to do graphics for film and TV?
I'd say Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator.
Because of the vector reason you stated earlier, right?
Yeah.
Enlarging
I mean,
and reducing. Yep.
Yep. I would say that's probably the most dominant program, at least in my experience. Anybody else?
I'm going to second Illustrator.
Yep.
Great. So Tess, that's the one you want to learn first. Also, somebody said, in addition to EDU programs, educational programs, what else can you do to build skills and knowledge? I think watching other people and learning programs. Anyone else want to comment?
I'd say like taking a typography class is super important. Like one of the main thing, you know, a lot of times if it's not a hero prop, like we're, you know, which we were explaining is something that's maybe key to the story. If it's just something that's part of the set and needs to fall into the background, you shouldn't notice it. And if the typography is bad, you could notice it and then it pulls you out of the story. So like, you know, that's just a really key thing. And then in addition to Illustrator, you know, Photoshop, we also use a lot. We do a lot of photo compositing, especially like if it's, you know, an apartment set or something, and there's supposed to be family photos of the actors. And ideally you have time to do photo shoots, but often you really do not have time to do photo shoots. So actors will send you photos from their lives and you have to composite, you know, one example of a composite is you composite them together to make it look like they're, you know, a family.
Cool. Thanks, Ariel. Okay, this is the last question. I'm going to ask each of you to comment. I thought this was a fun question. It's a long question, but answer it quickly, please, so that we can move on. Did you try to find jobs in shows, movies that appeal to you and your personal interests when you were first beginning out of school, or did you take anything that came your way? Why don't we start with Ariel, because you were just talking.
Definitely anything that comes your way. I think, you know, I started as a PA. I think I worked for 3 years as a PA, and it's a really great way to make connections and really learn how the art department works. And yeah, the advantage of being a PA is that you learn all this stuff, but it's also very much a grunt job. And if you are good at listening and following through, people will hire you on the next job. So you can move through all the jobs. And then once you get into the union, it's sort of the same deal where you really need to prove yourself and prove that you're somebody reliable, because the key to any show working well is that everyone is doing their job and doing it really well. So you prove that you can do it, and then hopefully as you go, you can maybe pick and choose a little more the projects you take.
Great. Carlos, your comment on that.
I agree with Ariel. Anything you can get, especially at the beginning. I start with a lot of reality shows, um, Celebrity Apprentice, and things that I'm not really proud of, but it gives me experience. Give me the chance to know many people that at that point were in the union and suddenly being set decorators or art directors also start to join the union, and then they know you can do also the job, so they start to ask you, why don't you join the union? You should try. Like they also try to get you jobs. So I think at the beginning, no, you cannot be picky. Eventually, I guess, but no.
Thank you, Carlos. Eric, would you like to comment on that?
Don't be picky. That's the bottom line. Take what you can get. I don't know when you first get out of school that you can afford to, be so selective. Don't do something that you find offensive or goes against your moral character or whatever it may be. But, take what you can get, do what you can do, because you'll also discover and have some experiences that you may not have had or discovered had you not done that job.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. And Zach, would you like to comment on that, please?
I think going along with exactly what Eric said, I think it's wise to take what you can when you can get it, and then that will really help inform the type of projects that you do want to kind of prioritize moving forward. And I think another aspect of it that we kind of touched on is like you'll also realize that there's people in other positions and production designers and art directors that you really enjoy working with and collaborating with, and that will also really help guide your next moves when you find a team that you love working with.
Thank you, Zach. Jim, would you like to comment on that, please?
I have not been able to pick the job that I want as of yet. Has not presented itself. I have been very fortunate to be able to kind of roll from one job to the next. People refer your name forward, and that's how most of the work that I've got, or you work with somebody. Like I worked with Jane on Murphy Brown, and then she went right into the movie Hustlers and asked me to join her. So it's really a very situational. I would love to work on a Marvel project at some point, but I haven't been like, oh, I'm not taking this because I'm waiting for a Marvel job. I don't think you have the opportunity to do that. You don't know when the next opportunity is going to come is really what it comes down to. Or if you pass on something, you may not get another call, so you can't really be too picky. But I agree with, don't do anything that goes against what you believe in or moral fiber, if it's something like that. But for the most part, it's been pretty, haven't really had much of a choice in a sense.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And Mason.
Yeah, I was gonna say, definitely don't be picky if you are able to land a graphic job. One thing I wanted to mention is, a lot of us here on this panel started off as art PAs and also moved on to art coordinators. I was an art coordinator for many years, and Eric was too. And it sort of solidifies the skills of and knowledge of navigating large art departments and knowing who to talk to if you have certain questions, and having the right office etiquette, and being confident in when you're speaking to big time producers and directors and stuff like that. So don't be afraid to also reach out and try to get, if you're just starting out, try to get art department PA jobs, because it may be an entry level position, but you never know where it's going to take you. So that's my advice.
Great. Thank you so much. We have to wrap it up because it's 6:09. We're 10 minutes over. Would our moderator, Karen, like to say anything before I wrap it up a little bit? I guess Karen's good. I'm going to direct you to...
You're muted, Karen, if you want.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I just wanted to thank everybody. Thanks, Elizabeth, and everybody for being here and for taking the time to do the presentation. And I hope everybody enjoyed themselves.
Great. And on behalf of, I just want to direct you to the chat because Karen put some really good resources. So did James about lynda.com for training. And if we did not get to your question, please make sure to fill out our questionnaire that I've put in the chat several times. And also our website is ETDM Mentorship. And ETD, I put that in the chat also. So take a second and look back at that. And I just want to remind you that our next panel is coming up very soon. It's on March 20th at 4:30, and it's for art directors. So it is related to what we've talked about today. And we thank you all for coming.